Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Standing by in the wings is Mr. John Cornett, ready to perform some music. Howdy, John.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Very well. Good. We have special guest here, Mr. Steve Elliott, who works together on our Hemp News site and has his own Toke Signals blog as well, and Mr. Casper Leach.
Happy Friday.
Who's our joint host with Time for Hemp and Time for Hemp Radio Network and all that jazz. We have some interesting film clips for you tonight and a few important hemp news stories. But first, as we always do, we'll bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
Hemp News starts today with a story out of Washington, D.C. In an interview with the New Yorker magazine published on Sunday, President Barack Obama spoke about his past drug use, said marijuana was no more dangerous than alcohol, talked about racial disparities in marijuana arrests, and said the new laws legalizing marijuana in Colorado and Washington are, quote, important, end quote. In the interview conducted by David Remnick of the New Yorker, Obama discussed cannabis and the war on drugs. Obama told Remnick, quote, as has been well documented, I smoked pot as a kid and I view it as a bad habit and a vice, not very different from the cigarettes that I smoked as a young person up through a big chunk of my adult life. I don't think it's more dangerous than alcohol, end quote. The president expressed concern about disparities in arrests for marijuana possession. He said, quote, middle-class kids don't get locked up for smoking pot and poor kids do. And he added that individual users shouldn't be locked up for long stretches of jail time. In the interview, Obama said he believes the new laws ending marijuana prohibition in Colorado and Washington are important. He said, quote, it's important for it to go forward because it's important for society not to have a situation in which a large portion of people have at one time or another broken the law and only a few select get punished, end quote, said Obama. Marijuana is currently classified by the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration as a Schedule I controlled substance, which the DEA considers the most dangerous class of drugs with high potential for abuse and potentially severe psychological and or physical dependence. Other Schedule I drugs include heroin, ecstasy, and LSD. Incredibly, cocaine and methamphetamine, both Schedule II drugs, are officially considered less dangerous than marijuana by the U.S. federal government. And while President Barack Obama said that marijuana is no more harmful than alcohol and that the new laws in Colorado and Washington ending marijuana prohibition were important, the Republican Party appears determined not to be outflanked by the Democrats on the issue of cannabis law reform. Rick Perry, Republican governor of Texas, who ran for the presidency in 2012 and was widely expected to consider a run in 2016, repeatedly recognized state governments' rights to legalize marijuana and touted his implementation of, quote, policies that start us toward a decriminalization in drug policy. And he's on a reform panel at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week. Perry joins New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, another candidate expected to run for the Republican presidential primary. And he's also noted his commitment to drug policy reform this week, saying, we will end the failed war on drugs that believes that incarceration is the cure for every ill caused by drug abuse, Christie said in his second inaugural address this Tuesday. The debate switching from can national politicians support reform to can national politicians afford not to. I've often said on this show that when a national politician takes hold in ownership and helps lead the movement to end marijuana prohibition, that president, just like FDR back with the end of alcohol prohibition, will seize a golden moment and become very popular in the process. The Davos Economic Panel in Switzerland, on which Rick Perry of Texas appeared, also featured Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos and former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, who both support ending the war on drugs. This marks the first time drug policy discussions have taken prominence in the forum's more than 40-year history. In recent years, debate and political will for drug policy reform has gained unprecedented momentum in many parts of the world, but especially in Latin America and the United States. In 2011, Kofi Annan, Paul Volcker, and Richard Branson joined former presidents Fernando Henrique Cardoso of Brazil, Cesar Gaviria of Colombia, and Ernesto Zedillo of Mexico, and other distinguished members of the Global Commission on Drug Policy, in saying it's time had come to break the taboo on exploring alternatives to the failed war on drugs and to encourage experimentation by governments with models of legal regulation of drugs, especially marijuana. More recently, current presidents Juan Manuel Santos of Colombia and Otto Pérez Molina in Guatemala and Jose Mujica in Uruguay have joined these calls for reform. In May, the Organization of American States produced a report commissioned by the heads of state of that region that include marijuana legalization as a likely policy alternative. Meanwhile, marijuana legalization has moved into the mainstream of the United States and international politics now that Colorado, Washington, and as of last month, Uruguay have become the first political jurisdictions in the world to approve the legal regulation of marijuana. Back home with the federal government, while speaking on Thursday at the University of Virginia Miller Center, the United States Attorney General Eric Holder said that the Obama administration will soon announce policy guidance that would make it easier for banks to deal with state legalized marijuana businesses. 20 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized marijuana for medical use, and 2 of those states, Colorado and Washington obviously, recently legalized marijuana like alcohol. Many banks have been afraid to open checkings or savings accounts for legalized marijuana businesses out of fear of breaking federal law. As a result, these businesses are forced to deal with large amounts of cash, creating public safety risks for employees, bystanders, and police officers. For instance, carrying multiple large bags of cash into state tax agencies to pay their tax bill in cash, since the banks won't allow them to have a bank account. Attorney General Eric Holder said, quote, "You don't want just huge amounts of cash in these places. They want to be able to use the banking system. There's a public safety component to this. Huge amounts of cash, substantial amounts of cash, just kind of lying around with no place for it to be appropriately deposited is something that would worry me, just from a law enforcement perspective," end quote. Eric Holder's remarks come on the heels of guidance issued in August by the Justice Department that indicated the Obama administration will not undermine state marijuana legalization, provided the states are responsibly regulating the marijuana businesses. In that New Yorker interview, Obama said marijuana is less harmful to people who use it than alcohol, that the war on drugs is creating racial disparities. So while Attorney General didn't offer specifics on the timeline for actions on banking services for marijuana, Deputy Attorney General James Cole in September said the Justice Department's working on the issue with the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, according to David Ingram at Reuters News Agency. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. We'll be back with Casper Leach and Steve Elliott right after John Cornett plays us some music.
Thank you, Paul.
John.
I just wanted to say, I think when it comes to the legalization and or ending of prohibition, there's a huge cottage industry there for security.
Mm-hmm.
There's a train coming
people changing. This prohibition has to stop. People turning, and they can't forgive the crop. Cannabis is the tree of life to me. Cannabis is more than just a weed. Thank you.
All right, Mr. John Cornett, welcome back to the show, Steve.
Thank you,
It's good
Paul.
to
I'm
see
glad to be
you.
here.
Welcome you too, Casper.
Casper.
If you guys out there watching have a question for us tonight, you can call us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. And it's been a pretty busy few months as things keep accelerating around the world in the world of marijuana politics, hasn't it?
There's a lot happening right now, and we've seen some interesting things just in the past week, including 3 Republican governors repositioning themselves as being cannabis friendly.
Yeah, it's
And,
amazing. It's amazing,
and the
given
fact
that
that-
they definitely haven't been in the past.
The fact that 2 of these are from conservative southern states is, I think, a marker of how far we've come in progress.
Well, and then to hear the president come out and say cannabis is not any worse than liquor, and then to have Eric Holder come out and say, well, we need to be able to have a banking system for the people who are making a living in a legal marijuana market. It sounds to me like they've learned how to do a Google search and Google search prohibition, and they're realizing that it really is a bad thing, a luxury item that we cannot afford.
Well, you know, ever since Harry Truman, several presidents have had that little saying on their desk, the buck stops here. And the fact that the president, as expressed in this New Yorker article, says that he thinks that the votes in Washington and Colorado are important, and it's important that they go forward, that's the bottom line. That's why we're seeing this change. If we had Mitt Romney in there, or George W. Bush, or any of the Bush clan, this wouldn't be happening this way.
And
You know,
what's
we
really
would-
incredible is that all of these developments we're talking about happened in 1 week. This is just 1 week's worth of progress, with the president saying that marijuana is no more harmful than alcohol, with Attorney General Holder making the banking announcement, and within the 3 Republican governors all coming out. That is 1 week's worth.
And then on the heels of that are the international news bits, where we have varieties of countries now that are also saying no more for the war on drugs, and they're making cannabis legal for recreational use as well as medical use. And so many countries now have hemp farming and a hemp industry. And even the buckle of the Bible Belt, Indiana, is now toying with the idea of having an industrial hemp crop. So it seems like people realize, you know, the truth. We've been saying for years, truth always wins over lies.
We knew we'd win eventually, but it is
Truth
gratifying
always wins
after
over lies.
me being active in this all my adult life, going back to the 70s, to see these finally long-awaited changes start to happen.
After fighting this hard for this long, it really is, and I think it's more important now than ever to remember you don't drop the ball until you get to the end zone.
Oh, yeah.
And
Back
we-
in the 70s, it looked like marijuana was going to be legal in the short term then, and there was a huge backlash that lasted 30 years.
But now we
40
are
years.
so much farther. We got crops in, we got businesses in, we got an attorney general who is now saying let's make a banking system available to the businesses here. We got a president, I think, eager to even move it from Schedule 1. So if he were to do an executive order and to end the prohibition, he would be a hero in the annals of history from here to the end of time. Because it would turn, yes, I said that right.
No, you said it wrong.
No, I said it right. And it would always forever be known as the man who changed the course of human history at that point.
But
Take
he
us
doesn't want to
back
be that
history.
guy, and he said that in this New Yorker article. He was very clear in saying that he doesn't want to be the one advocating. He talked about the dangers, and you know, even talked about the the slippery slope to cocaine and methamphetamine use. You know, that the government shouldn't be giving out shots of cocaine and methamphetamine. You know, he raised that specter.
And then he
in that
called the
same
Chang
interview.
gang up and say, okay, Michelle and I are home. Come by with an ounce.
The fact that we're this close, though, means that we have to keep the pressure on. We are in a position of increasing power and influence, and that means that it's like we're on a used car lot and they're offering us a better and a better deal. We don't need to stop until every adult in this country has the right to cultivate and possess cannabis. There is nothing short of that is going to shut us up.
And as Jack would say, and the POWs are home.
Exactly.
And we have 2 initiatives that are in circulation right now here in the state of Oregon that would do just that. We are pretty far along in our petition drive. We have about 25,000 signatures on the constitutional amendment, the Oregon Cannabis Amendment, and about 20,000 signatures on the next version of the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act. We have a little bit over 5 months to go. And just this week, the Oregon legislature dropped a bill that would have the legislature debate legalizing marijuana next year for it to go into effect the following year. It actually addressed our initiative number 22 and said that if we got more votes than them, then our law would go into effect, and if they got more votes than we did, but we still passed, they take out the initial implementing sections but wouldn't throw out the law if it passed. And it brought up another initiative that's not in circulation as well. But you know, when you introduce legislation, as these people have done in the Oregon legislature in the special short February session, that doesn't mean that's what's coming out. That's just what they're starting the debate with. And so it could change dramatically and might not even come out. Now, what they want to do is refer a bill to the ballot, and we'll have to see what actually comes out of that.
I think the other aspect is most of the candidates who win any office oftentimes win by a narrow margin of 1 to 2%, whereas any marijuana initiative wins by a landslide of 80%. And they're realizing that any marijuana initiative is more popular than any political candidate or party. And if they're going to get reelected or get elected, they better embrace the people who have the voting bloc, which is the ones who are buying the herb. Thank you.
We got 61% here in Multnomah County, but in the last election we got 47%. Now up in Washington State, the much more conservative and much better funded initiative put forward by Peter Lewis and backed eventually by the Drug Policy Alliance, I-502, has become law. And you have to live under that, Steve. And you, being an author and writer for the Seattle Weekly, for instance, with a dispensary review column, you get to see a lot of these different dispensaries up there. And I know that the whole political debate's been pretty scary. You want to address that?
Right, the dispensaries in Washington State are fighting for their very survival right now because the Liquor Control Board, which was put in charge of recreational marijuana by I-502, was quickly also put in charge of medical marijuana by the legislature after the voters had approved I-502. So they made some recommendations to the legislature, which is now in session. Among those were to end all collective gardens by patients, and that in effect would shut down the dispensary system in Washington State, because the dispensaries operate under the collective garden portion of Washington's medical marijuana law. They also initially recommended that patients no longer be allowed to grow at home, and this really got people upset because patients for 15 years now in Washington have been allowed to grow their own. Many of them wouldn't be able to afford the state store prices that are expected when the legal stores open about the middle of this year.
The model is that it gets taxed at, what, 25% on the grower, 25% on the processor, and 25% on the retailer. And that doesn't count any local taxes that local cities and counties might impose.
25% at 3 levels, then plus whatever sales tax.
Once you combine that, then you're talking about 150% tax.
We could end up with some very expensive weed in Washington.
The price in Colorado with the rollout of the law this past month has been very expensive too, $400 to $600 an ounce.
I've heard about some of those $600 ounces, and that makes me worry about safe access for patients. I know that a lot of patients are on limited incomes, and that they are priced out of the market when these kind of things happen. That's why we need to consider the medical marijuana market separately from the recreational marijuana market.
Well, now, Colorado, those kind of led the way in that the marijuana dispensaries, which were licensed first commercially, not as nonprofits in Colorado, got the first crack at the commercial sales licenses. And so they're still keeping, most of them are keeping a two-tiered pricing structure where those taxes don't apply to medical patients. And a lot of medical patients, over 100,000 in Colorado, about 120,000, have opted to keep their medical marijuana cards in the years since marijuana legalization passed in Colorado.
That's the way it needs to be done with a two-tiered pricing system. I only wish that Washington's law had been written as well.
Well, you know, our law was written by myself and others. The Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, which was defeated at the polls last year, but we anticipate will win when we put it on the ballot this year. That law was written specifically to subsidize patients so that patients can get cannabis at farmers' cost.
Now that's
so
the
it'd
way
be
it
a
should
lot
be written.
less expensive for patients.
I can heartily endorse that one.
Well, good.
Well,
good.
I would think that the state of Washington would still be more concerned about keeping the black market out of the state,
Right.
and would take into consideration the folly of the amount of taxation that they keep leveling on it.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, Casper, because there's a really interesting thing about to happen in Washington State. Our Attorney General just said that cities and counties, or cities and local localities, can opt out of I-502 and ban recreational marijuana in their jurisdictions. So that means that safe access is not going to be there. We've been told that patients could depend on safe access through I-502 stores. Now we're going to have whole areas that aren't going to have any legal marijuana stores. So you have to ask yourself where those patients are going to be getting safe access. They're going to be needing to grow if they're going to have any access at all, is the way it looks to me.
They sure are. Or to have someone growing like we have here. You know, I can't grow. I live in a small apartment and I'm not very good at growing. And I have someone who is and who's nice enough to do that for me. And so here in the state, that's possible.
Right.
So we are taking phone calls this evening. If you have a question or comment for us tonight, give us a call at 503-288-4442. We also have a film clip we're going to roll. You know, we're here standing on the shoulders of many of our mentors that aren't with us anymore, such as Gatewood Galbraith, who would have just celebrated his 67th birthday this week, and a guest on this show. Another one back in 1998 was a New York Times best-selling author, Peter McWilliams. We have a little clip we're going to roll of Peter McWilliams, who passed away back in 1998, and discuss that a little more after this clip. So enjoy.
I want to tell you about a pair of epiphanies that I had in 1996. The first happened in March of 1996, when I was diagnosed with both AIDS and cancer. I tell you this early on because I want your sympathy throughout the rest of this speech. Later so the nausea that was treated, that was caused by these things, ended instantly with marijuana. With one puff of marijuana, well, and it is astonishing how well it works. And you have to understand how serious it is when you can't keep your medication down. It's not just that it's uncomfortable. If you can't keep that medication down, it's not going to save your life. And that is the important point. We're talking about life and death here when we're talking about treating AIDS and cancer. 20% of the people who are not taking the combination therapy, which is working so well for those who can tolerate it. I am one of them. But for those who cannot tolerate it, 20% stop because of nausea. I wonder how many of those 20%, if they had access, readily available, inexpensive medical marijuana, if indeed they would have that same problem. Every day, people are denied cancer chemotherapy because the doctors stop, knowing that they will die of malnutrition if they go another day without eating. Nausea is an unsolved problem of medicine, and marijuana is the finest anti-nausea medication known to science. At the same time, our leaders have lied about this consistently. Our leaders whom we trust, whom we look up to, from the Democratic president to the who knows what he is, drug czar, to the Republican leaders in Congress in both the House and the Senate. They have lied to us about medical marijuana. They have lied to us about the harm of marijuana. There is no more benign medicinal substance known to human beings. And we have been lied about this. And so this was my first epiphany, was over here, watching my normal run to the bathroom with one puff of marijuana turn into a meandering raid on the kitchen. And so the one epiphany was over here, and I said, I am not going to rest until medical marijuana is available to every sick person who needs it in the United States. I would like to suggest to you that you, not necessarily as a party, but you individually, maybe not as a party plank, but more as a pet project, kind of a little chia pet project, to actively work for medical marijuana in this country. I believe medical marijuana currently stands for the most hideous ongoing example of government interference in the private lives of individuals. This medical marijuana prohibition is an outrage within an outrage within an outrage. The first outrage, of course, is the war on drugs itself. Prohibition does not work, has not worked, cannot work, and anyone who says it can is either deeply delusional or is making money on the drug war. The next layer down is, of course, marijuana prohibition. This is a plant that has never hurt anyone in 5,000 years. And in a country where 400,000 people die prematurely of cigarettes, and 100,000 people die prematurely from alcohol, that this herb, this plant, this weed, should be so illegal in this country that since the 1995 Omnibus Crime Bill, if you possess enough of it, our government will put you to death. If you don't think marijuana is still prohibited, keep in mind that 640,000 people were arrested in 1996 alone, the most ever, while we have a Speaker of the House and a President and a Vice President who have all admitted to smoking marijuana. That's one arrest every 48 seconds. These are pothead baby boomers, and it's an outrage that they should put their fellows in prison.
So that was Peter McWilliams at the Libertarian Party National Convention in 1998. Shortly thereafter, he died. He had been writing a book with Todd McCormick in California about growing medical marijuana, and he'd given Todd an advance. So the federal government came in and said he was part of a conspiracy to produce marijuana and took away his medical marijuana and put him through a federal prosecution, and a Judge Rufus King denied him the ability to use medical marijuana to treat his nausea. And he subsequently passed away in his bathroom from asphyxiation during a bout of nausea. And so basically I called Judge Rufus King down at the LA federal court the next day and told him the blood was on his hands for murdering Peter McWilliams. And I still hold that opinion pretty tightly. But McWilliams, I never met him personally, but I did exchange a lot of emails with him. We were virtual friends way back in the early through the late 1990s.
He's a very inspiring writer and an inspiring man, and it's important that we remember the kind of barbarity that this war against marijuana can lead to. I mean, the government basically killed this guy by taking away the medicine that allowed him to fight his nausea enough to keep his medication down. He choked to death while he was sick at his stomach.
And if he'd had cannabis, as he talked about very eloquently here at the Libertarian National Convention,
that would have made the difference.
Of the cannabis.
It would have been easily addressed if he had just been allowed to use his non-toxic, safe cannabis.
But his mother had put her house up as security for his bail out of federal jail. So he didn't feel that he could misuse that trust.
He was not going to put her house at risk.
Exactly. We are accepting your phone calls, and we have a couple callers standing by. Let's go ahead and take one of those calls. Welcome to the show, caller.
Hi. I swear I was thinking about whether there'd be a different classification or rules for medical patients compared to recreational use of marijuana if the law passes in Oregon. And the gentleman that's a guest tonight had mentioned that too.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little more.
Sure. None of the proposals, whether the legislatures, our organization, which is Initiative 21 and 22, nor any others, talk about taking away medical marijuana patients' rights under the state law. And I know that's the way that the I-502 was sold up in Washington. But now that the Washington Liquor Control Board has control of it, they seem to be changing that, though it's waffled back and forth. I think now they say they're still going to allow patients to grow up there. Is that right?
They did change their mind about that after we had considerably
raised a lot of stink.
And when they had the public input meeting, we showed up and we told them that just wasn't going to work for us.
Yeah.
So now they say 6 plants for patients, and 3 of those can be in flower. That's their current recommendation to the legislature.
So they're trying to get it cut back from the current 15 plants and 24 ounces.
And those 15 can all be in flower at once if you want them to be. And now they're saying of your 6, you can only flower 3 of those at once. So that's a big change.
Yeah, that's a lot less than what we have in Oregon. But our proposal definitely allows patients to continue to with the medical marijuana program as it now stands, and it subsidizes the sale of marijuana to patients so that they will get it at a farmer's cost before it is processed and retailed.
It's my understanding that there's some new rules and regulations that are popping up here in Oregon. According to the wonderful people at Monoma Wellness down there at First Street, Nikki's Diggity Dang, hello, shameless plug. We got rules that are being changed and security.
There's new temporary rules that address testing and security and the density of the dispensaries here in Oregon. These new temporary rules are going into effect. They're going to start taking applications on March 1st for the dispensaries. It says that the dispensaries cannot be within 1,000 feet of a school or each other. So there won't be like a green light district like you might see in out on Foster here in Portland, or you won't see them all congregating together. They have to be more than 1,000 feet from each other, and they have this. They've recommended this very stringent testing requirement that won't even allow soap to be used on the plants to protect them from spider mites and fungus and mold and other things.
Not really all that far though apart.
Well, you'd be surprised. You try to find many. There aren't many areas, that are less than 1,000 feet from a school, and they have to also be in areas that are zoned commercial, industrial, or agricultural.
Oh, well, you didn't say all that, guys.
Well, there's a whole bunch of other rules, and you can find them out there online if you're interested in being a dispensary.
I guess that's what they call it, marijuana regulation.
I guess so. We have an online question, a caller, and someone in the studio audience. Go right ahead, John. What's your question here in the studio audience?
I just want to know if whenever someone is considering being 1,000 feet from a school, does that also include like the lady next door who wants to open up a toddler or thing in the backyard.
It doesn't include the ones that want to open up, but it does include daycare centers and private schools and
So if
things
I'm
like
growing
that.
this- if I'm growing
So it does
legally in my
include
backyard-
businesses that are actively licensed as daycare centers. You can't be within 1,000 feet of those.
Wow.
So if I say we're growing in my backyard, and that was
No, it
my-
wouldn't affect you being able to grow your medicine. It's just, we're talking about these commercial dispensaries. And several cities have moved to ban those. I know in Medford they have, Tualatin, Hillsborough just voted to have a 4-month moratorium on them. And you're saying that the legislature in Washington is moving to allow that. I know in Colorado that's been a big issue with these legal marijuana stores. For instance, in Colorado Springs, where the United States Air Force Academy is located, the Air Force said that if they allowed these social adult marijuana stores to open in Colorado Springs, then they would move the Air Force Academy out of Colorado Springs. So there is a lot of pushback and blowback on both sides of the coin.
It's kind of funny, in Washington State, even the Liquor Control Board was mad at our Attorney General for saying that towns can ban the marijuana stores, because the Liquor Control Board maintains that they can't compete with the black market if there are whole areas where only the black market is allowed.
And they make good cash too off the licensing fees, don't they?
They do, and
Just saying,
that actually is their main thing now that selling liquor has been taken away from the Liquor Control Board by the voters of Washington. We took that away from
A
them.
few years before marijuana was legalized. And we have an initiative that's moving forward here in Oregon to do the same thing, to allow commercial stores, not just liquor stores.
So marijuana's their only gig now at the Liquor Control Board, really.
Right, and it looks like it'll be that way in Oregon as well.
You give a politician his cut of the pie, and they will make the pie legal.
We have a question from our online viewers, and for those of you out there that are watching, if you have anyone in the United States that you want to be able to watch this show, they can go to ustream.tv. That's ustream.tv, and watch us every Friday night at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Just look up Cannabis Common Sense there. The question online is, what changes were made to the Oregon legislation to ensure its passage in 2014? Well, there were a couple of things that were very contentious in Oregon's Measure 80 in the last campaign. One was that 4 out of the 7-member proposed Oregon Cannabis Commission, we decided to separate liquor from marijuana, and so we set up a Cannabis Commission. And in last year's version, it would have had 4 out of the 7 members would have been appointed, would have been elected by the people who hold licenses to grow, process, or retail cannabis. A lot of people didn't like that, even though 3 remained to be appointed by the governor. So we made a change this time where all 7 members of the new proposed Oregon Cannabis Commission will be appointed by the governor. Depends on who the governor is, right? And then the other major change is that there was no limit on how much an adult over the age of 21 could possess, use, and grow under Measure 80. Under our new proposal, Initiative 22, it says that an adult can grow 24 plants and have 24 ounces. And so, which would be a lot more than the 1 ounce allowed in Washington and Colorado currently, or proposed by the legislature and another campaign that hasn't got off the ground here in Oregon. So those are the differences. We have a telephone caller. Go right ahead. Hello, caller.
Thank you, Paul. It's Mike Krowitz. I've got a update from Virginia, and I wanted to, before anything else, to congratulate you on another great auction purchase there for your
so
museum
you see
collection.
it here. We'll get the show and tell here in just a minute. Yep, this was not a cheap little bottle, but I know you and I both watch these bottles online.
Well, I'm very proud to say that I was not the underbidder, so I did not drive up your price, but I was a bidder.
I thought about
proud,
putting in a
I'm proud
note
of you getting
saying,
it.
hey, I'm going to be bidding on this one, but I didn't know if that was fair or not. Can you close in on that, Cowboy? Just close right in, and here's this powdered extract of cannabis from Eli Lilly. It says on the bottle that it's an exhilarant, antispasmodic, and powerful narcotic. It also says that overdoses can be combated by cautious doses of strychnine. So it tells you that if you take too much of this, you should take some strychnine.
Wow.
Well, that was circa 1910. I wouldn't recommend that myself. I recommend orange juice. If you take too much cannabis, vitamin C will help with that.
Well, wait, if you're a politician, take the strychnine.
That's an important artifact, and I'm glad you bought it, Paul. The Eli Lilly
I've got a
company,
couple
took
others
a very
of these,
strong
one of
role
which
in all
has
that,
some of the
cannabis
contents in it, but this one by far has the best label on the bottle. So I definitely like those little, this was an ounce of hashish, and so some of our laws want to, for instance, this the state laws want to make it illegal to make extracts at all under the legislature's bill and another bill out there. Our initiative, of course, will allow people to make extracts. However, we discourage people from using butane in enclosed environments. And that's been a big danger. We see lots of explosions all around the country with that, and that's been one of the things the legislature is trying to address, and rightfully so.
Yeah, but there's just no cure for stupid.
But the powdered extract of cannabis is produced with a mechanical sieve. You get a silk screen, and you take your buds, and the key for the powdered extract of cannabis just comes right off, a little yellow powder. And so that's what this was. It wasn't a chemical or solvent-based extraction process.
Right.
I actually have a theory, Paul, that if you read about the jazz musicians, they had the muggles, the giggle sticks, the marijuana cigarettes, but they also had these little capsules that they were available to them around the 1920s, early 1930s, and I would bet you that someone that was rather industrious went down to the pharmacy and got some of these powdered extract bottles and some of those empty gelatin capsules, and they filled them up with the powdered extract and sold it on the street.
Maybe so. Maybe so. Of
My-
course,
my
this would have
theory,
been
for
legal
what
then.
it's worth.
At this point, when this bottle came out about 100 years ago.
Yeah, well, that was right about when the jazz musicians that would have been smoking marijuana legally before the Tax Act would have been able to, kind of take advantage of that. I don't think anyone would be able to just walk into the pharmacy and buy anything. I mean, you had to kind of pass the smell test then and now, I think.
Yeah, I know, Michael, you've been instrumental in getting the Veterans Administration all across the United States to recognize medical marijuana in states where patients, VA patients, can get medical marijuana permits. And you had an update on what's happening in your state of Virginia? I know.
Yes, absolutely. Last week you heard that from Virginians for Safe Access, TJ, I was telling you that there's going to be a big day on Monday. There's going to be a hearing, and sure enough, we had that hearing. There was a delegate that tried to repeal our age-old first-generation medical marijuana law. This was the second attempt. His first attempt, believe it or not, was in 1997. It took us about a year to knock back his repeal effort then, and believe it or not, we knocked it back in less than one session. I said less than one session because they didn't even allow us to get through all our testimony before they actually motioned to kill the bill or lay it on the table, as they say. And the beauty of it was that the normal chapter of Virginia that was being formed really this year, and the Safe Access Virginia chapter in Virginia that was being formed this year, really were just going to have a kind of a slow, mellow lobby day and introduce themselves. And instead, we're kind of propelled forward by fighting this bill and really made a lot of traction and got a lot of great news coverage. And it's just amazing how not only did we kill the bill in one fell swoop in the first subcommittee hearing, but we seem to have consumed all its energy and are moving forward.
I see. So you're doing a radio program on Casper's network.
Yes, a couple actually. On Sundays, you can join me on alternating Sundays. You can join me in the International Cannabis News Report, and then the other one is my Cannabis Museum Radio Hour. And what we're trying to do with the radio hour is develop somewhat of an archive of stories, people's cannabis stories, somewhat of a oral history, hopefully.
I see. Okay, and when are those shows?
Sunday at it'll be noon your time.
Okay, on the
Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network, heard all around the world at timeforhemp.com, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and everywhere people like to get together, break out their buds, and take Time for Hemp.
And proud, Paul, to be part of Casper's regular lineup. I join him on Fridays on Time for Hemp's Small Town Fridays, and on this Friday coming up next week, we've got Ben Swan, and that's a really, really interesting fellow, an multiple award-winning journalist who previously worked for the mainstream, journalism, so mainstream media. So he's our window into the psyche of the mainstream media, and at the same time, he's onto our issue, and he's given us a lot of great data and info.
And he's joined our team too. Yes, he's won 2 Emmys and 2 Edward R. Murrow Awards for reporting, and he's a very bright man to have on the team, and we sure appreciate that. And Lady Swerdlow has also joined our team, and we'll be broadcasting every Tuesday on the Time for Hemp Broadcasting Network. So we're growing and getting bigger every week. We're going to be adding more and more people. Soon we're going to be having the German show. And
you've already got a French and Spanish one?
We got French and Spanish, yeah. So
more languages.
We are growing, aren't we, Michael?
Absolutely. It's very exciting.
Well, thanks, Michael. Thanks for calling in, and keep up the great work out there.
Thanks for everything you do out there. I'm really excited to watch what's going on out in Oregon. You're our future. I don't need a time machine. I just need a TV.
All right, and an internet connection. Thanks for calling.
There you go.
We have another couple callers standing by. Let's take the next call. Not that one.
That was Homeland Security.
This other one.
That was Homeland
Welcome
Security.
to the show, caller.
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Hey, I just want to give you a little insight on the note there on that powdered cannabis as taking strychnine. I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I do take strychnine every day for my health.
Oh, you do?
It's called Coumadin. It's a blood thinner. So my guess is they prescribed a blood thinner to minimize the effects of an OD.
I see. Well, thanks for pointing that out. I wasn't aware of it.
There you go.
The tie between Coumadin and strychnine. All right.
It's same stuff. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for letting us know that. I think we have another caller. Welcome to the show, caller. Nope.
Again,
not that one.
Homeland Security, listening in.
You're a little worried about that. Well, I just figure they're listening. Always have.
Remember over the holidays I suggested to adopt a DEA agent?
Well, one's hired and running some of the program up in Washington, right?
I saw that they have actually got one up there, yeah.
Yeah,
he's
a
come to the
DEA
other
agent
side.
from here in Portland.
Yep.
Is working. Where is he working there?
He's working for a private firm that is getting into the legal marijuana business.
Living proof. You can reach out to our brothers and sisters in arms
and
at the
turn
DEA.
them to sanity.
Love. Big
Come to the
warm
light.
hug to all you at the DEA.
We have another caller out there. Let's go ahead and take that call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hello, caller.
Hello, yes?
Yes, you.
Yeah, Shane. This is Shane.
Hey, Shane.
I've been an advocate forever and paid with marijuana felonies, and I just want to ask them what they think about people like us have 20 years experience growing, and they violated my doctors at first to give me marijuana permit, so I lost my home over it.
Oh no.
But but I was wondering to know what your views are on people like us helping the government grow.
Well, I am a marijuana prisoner of war from back in the 90s and 80s, and I can tell you that I am completely in favor of allowing people who've been convicted of marijuana crimes to participate in growing and cultivating marijuana. Here in Oregon, as long as you haven't been convicted within 5 years of applying or before 2006, then you can get a medical marijuana grower's card here in the state of Oregon. However, I think the new dispensary law, the temporary rules, say that you have to have a background check and not have any previous convictions to own and operate a dispensary. But it seems like someone who did could hire someone who didn't have those and put them up as a primary person and still be operating the dispensary anyway. So I think that we've written our laws, Initiative 22 and 21, specifically to allow any adult to be able to enter the industry, regardless of past convictions for marijuana law violations.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and how do you think that's going to work out in Oregon?
You know, we will see. We've got this new dispensary law. They're going to start applying for accepting applications for licenses in about a month on the 1st of March. So stay tuned on our upcoming shows, and we'll be covering that.
Oh, cool. And then I heard it's going to be really expensive to get that license. Is that you know about what the numbers are going to be?
No, we don't know. It's still too early to tell.
Right, that's what I kind of figured.
All right, listen, we got other callers. Thank you, sir.
My number is 503-704.
Okay, don't give out your number on the air here.
Have any questions?
We have other callers. Let's go ahead and take another caller. We'll see how many we can squeeze in the next couple of minutes. Welcome to the show, caller.
Buddy. You have Bye.
Okay. You want to talk about your work on hemp news and your various activities? I know you've got a book out there, the Little Black Book on, is it Bud?
Little Black Book of Marijuana.
That's it?
Absolutely. From day to day, if you want to keep up with the latest in cannabis and hemp news, your go-to place is hemp news at hemp.org/news. We put fresh news up there every day, so if you want to find out the latest of what's happening, that's definitely your go-to place.
And we've got about 340,000 followers on our Facebook page as well.
Yes, we have.
So you're posting those there every day?
Those things get well circulated, and it's gratifying to see the response to them. I also have the site tokesignals.com, which is my personal blog, and if you'd like to check out the history and the culture of cannabis, you will enjoy the Little Black Book of Marijuana.
All right. And so you can get all of those through...
You can get the Little Black Book of Marijuana at tokesignals.com.
Or on Amazon.
Or on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com.
All of those places.
Your local bookstore.
All right. And that kind of is a guide to the various strains?
It has some about strains. It has a lot about the history and culture and the relationship between the human race and the cannabis plant.
All right. All right. We have one more caller we'll squeeze in here. Welcome to the show, caller.
Yes, I wanted to know if you'd heard about the motion detecting sprinklers that you can put in your backyard for keeping animals and people out of your yard at night.
Oh, yeah. You could put a motion detector and set off anything from a chainsaw to a floodlight to sprinklers.
Well, they sell the sprinklers with the motion detector right on them.
Oh, no, I hadn't heard about
hook
that
them right up.
Combination there, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's called a scarecrow.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Casper?
Yes.
We'll get you one more plug before we...
It's not my nature to shamelessly plug the Global Broadcasting Network at timeforhemp.com, where you can find 20 other hosts broadcasting all around the world how important it is to end prohibition, where you can find Judge James Gray, who will be coming out to talk to the American public on our broadcasting network the day after Obama gives the State of the Union address, where we're going to have a 3-hour special on Valentine's Day, all in French, the language of love, as a love letter to the marijuana movement from us to you. And it was not my nature to shamelessly plug all the hardworking people you can find at timeforhemp.com, but please share us with your friends now that I've had a chance to mention it. Thank you.
Certainly. And of course, once again, we have 2 initiative campaigns in circulation right now. We need your help on those. Go to hemp.org, HEMP.org to find out more of those. Go to hemp.org/news to get the new news as we update it. Mainly Steve here updates it almost every day. And if you're interested in finding a doctor to help you get a medical marijuana permit from Maine to Hawaii, we have doctors all across the United States and are closing in on our 200,000th patient. So you can go also to hemp.org, HEMP.org, to find out about our political and clinic work. Thanks for watching. We're going to go out on another great song with Mr. John Cornette. I want to thank you for coming on the show again, Steve.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. We'll be back next week with a fellow from the Seattle Hemp Fest, and the following week we expect we'll have Dr. Philip Levesque right here on the show. So tune in next week. Get involved in our move to end marijuana prohibition and help us restore hemp.
people talking. This prohibition has to stop. Children dying while we legislate the crop. Cannabis is more than just weed. Cannabis is the tree of life to me. There's a train coming, and she's rolling down the track. People changing, and there ain't no turning